Hi there and a warm welcome to everyone. This is episode 86 of The Art of Business English. Now in today's episode we're going to look at some aspects of socializing in English and more specifically how to talk about your job title. So if you've ever found yourself in a social situation, you'll probably know that it's very common for someone to ask you about your job or what it is that you do. Now, if you're a non-native English speaker, sometimes this can be a little overwhelming, or sometimes you may not really know how to answer. Or in fact, you may sometimes even misinterpret the question altogether. So if you want to know how to talk confidently about your job, then keep on listening. So let's take a look at what we're going to be covering in today's episode. Firstly, we'll be looking at some ways in which people commonly ask you or ask others about their job. Secondly, we'll cover why your job title is so important and some typical job titles. And finally, we will look at how you can introduce and describe your work and your position. So let's get started. So what are some ways to ask people people's jobs or ask people about their job? The first thing that you need to understand is what type of expressions people use to ask people about their job. Okay, and the most common way to ask someone about their job is by saying, "So, what do you do?" Okay, so I know it sounds pretty simple, but well, this simple question can in fact cause a lot of problems for people who are non-native English speakers. So let me explain why. Firstly, as the question contains the auxiliary verb do to form the question and then the verb do, people often don't understand the question, especially if it's said quickly. Okay, that's the first problem. And then if there's a lot of background noise or you're in a loud room or a bar, it can get a bit confusing. Okay, this can also lead to confusion and embarrassment, especially if you have just met someone. Maybe you answer the question in a strange manner. Okay. I'm going to share with you the most common misunderstanding. And firstly, this is specifically for many Spanish speakers. They're not used to this question form, okay, especially for asking about someone's job, okay? Because if you translate the expression in Spanish, it would be ¿qué haces? Okay, now in English, this would translate back to what are you doing? Okay, ¿qué haces in Spanish would be what are you doing now? Okay, so often a non-native English speaker will get confused and think, well, I'm here talking to you. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so there can be a bit of confusion when you hear that question, what do you do? Not what are you doing? Okay, so therefore, if you're in a social setting, you really need to be sensitive to this very common question in English. What do you do? Okay, it means as a job and it doesn't mean what are you doing now? All right, that's the first problem. All right, the second one. Let's take a look then at some other ways that, people can ask or you could be asked about your job. So the first one is, what do you do for a living? Okay, what do you do for a living? For a living means ganarse de la vida. So where do you work? More specifically, where do you work? Or what's your job? Or what do you work as? All right, that's another one. And who do you work for? Okay. So now that we have these common expressions clear, let's take a look at how we can respond to them. So first, why your job title is so important. All right. So over the years, I've often found that non-native speakers, they often have trouble describing their job title, okay? Even worse, they don't really attach enough importance to their job title. However, specifically with English-speaking countries, your job title is very important and it should clearly and directly provide an immediate impression of the job's role and responsibilities, okay? So a job title can really make an impression. So it can set a certain status and it can instantly make people interested in you and what you do. So it's very important that you have clear your job title. So the difficulty with job titles is that they can sometimes be lost in translation. It is therefore recommendable to sit down and take the time to find the best, or the closest translation for your specific job. Okay, remember, in the English-speaking world, your job title is important. Okay, and it should clearly give someone an idea of your position. Okay, so let's consider the position administrativo. Okay, in Spanish, yo soy un administrativo. Okay, so if you didn't take the time to find the correct translation, in a social situation, you might say, I am an administrative. Okay, now in English, this makes not much sense, and it's not really reflective or descriptive of any of your roles. Okay, so in English, we have clerks or administrative assistants. So here you can see I'm using administrative as an adjective and not as a noun. You could also be an administrative officer. Okay, this sounds much more natural to a native English speaker. Okay, so it's important that we understand the correct translation. The other common problems I see is with the word responsable. Okay, yo soy un responsable there. Non-native English speakers will say something like, I am a responsible for the accounts department. So I am a responsible for the accounts department. Again, this doesn't make much sense, okay? Because in English, we are in charge or responsible for something. So you should say something like, I'm in charge of the accounts department. Or you could also say, head up. I head up the accounts department. So to head up something or to head up a department means that you're the leader or manager of that department. Therefore, in summary, if you are in management or in a management role, you can say you are in charge of, or you're responsible for, or you head up, or you manage a specific department. Okay, so that's really important. Okay, getting the right translation. So before we move on to the final part of this episode, let's take a look at some common job titles that you could use on your CV. So we've got, for example, a business analyst. You've got a marketing manager or a marketing coordinator, web designer, project manager, customer service officer. You've got a key accounts manager or a purchasing manager, an accountant, graphic designer, social media assistant or community manager, an SEO manager, an account executive, quality control coordinator, a human resources officer or a human resources manager, a sales assistant, executive assistant. So there's a whole bunch. And the list really goes on and on. So I do think, we should also cover the C-suite, okay? The C-suite, which are top leadership positions, okay? So if you hold one of these positions, a C-suite position, you should always use your job title, as any one of these positions carries a lot of prestige with it. Okay, so if you're the CEO, you are the Chief Executive Officer. If you are the COO, you're the Chief Operating Officer. If you're the CFO, you're the Chief Financial Officer. If you're the CIO, you're the Chief Information Officer. CTO, Chief Technology Officer. CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. And CHRO will be the Chief Human Resources Officer. Okay, so obviously there are hundreds, if not thousands, of job titles. And remember, you should always do your research, okay, on your position, and first make sure that your title is reflective of your position and that it sounds correct in English. Okay, so the added advantage of job titles is that you can make they can make for great conversation starters. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can put them into action. Okay, so how you can introduce your job title and talk about your position. Okay, so firstly, there are a few ways we can respond. So let me start with some typical responses to the question, what do you do? So if someone says to you, what do you do? You could say, I am a key accounts manager at Combank, or I am the director of a small manufacturing firm, or I am the CFO for a multinational based out of Leeds in the UK. So let's now dissect these three examples. So first, we're using the present simple, I am, so we're talking like directly using the verb to be. Okay, it's quite simple. Secondly, we always use the article, okay, a or an before any job title. It's very important. This is a little different from Spanish, for example. With Spanish, we can say soy médico, okay, but in English we can't. We must say I am a doctor, okay, so we can't say I am doctor. So we always need an article before your job title. Thirdly, because in a company there's only one chief executive officer or chief financial officer, we don't use the article a, okay? So you don't say I am a CEO, but instead we use the article the, okay? So to summarize, if your job can have more than one person, so it's general, no, with the same title, we use a to talk about the job. So, I am an accountant because maybe there are more accountants. But if there is only one position for your job in the company, so there's only one CEO, then we use the article the, okay? So let's just dive a little deeper. Now, in the first example, I provide the job title, and then I also say where I work. This is great if you work for a well-known or prestigious company, as it will add to your credibility. In the second example, we also give our title and then also add information about the size and the type of company we work for. Now, this is great if you work for a smaller or less known company because it helps put your role into context for the other person. And in the final example, I give the title and then use non-descriptive, the non-descriptive word multinational to define the size of the company as well as mention its location. So why do I do all these things? Well, firstly, it helps to define what you do and attaches the status, the necessary status and importance to your job title. Secondly, it gives the listener enough information to start forming an opinion of you and a desire often to dive in and ask more questions. Now, this is great for conversation starting and keeping a conversation going. So in the last part, I'll quickly show you how you can follow up these job title statements with a quick question to keep the conversation going and express interest. So for example, I'm a key accounts manager at Combank, no? So you could say, really? How long have you been with Combank? So how long have you been with Combank? So that's a follow-up question. I'm the director of a small manufacturing firm. Oh, what does your company produce? And finally, I'm the CFO of for a multinational based out of Leeds in the UK. I've never been to Leeds, but I hear it's an interesting place to live. Sorry, which company is that? So make a habit, okay, of discovering your job title in English, okay? That's super important, as well as learning some of the more common job titles in the marketplace. Well, that's it, my friends. Remember, your job title should be descriptive and very clearly reflective of your position and status, okay? It's very important in English. It's also important to think about the types of questions your job title might generate, okay? So you're ready to answer those questions in simple terms. Some people have complicated jobs or complicated aspects of their job, and if it's complicated, maybe you need to explain it simply. Additionally, it's important to know how to politely ask people about their jobs so that you can start or keep a conversation going in a social situation. And with that being said, if you are interested in improving your socializing skills in English, then you should take a look at my new course on how to engage people in conversation, okay? This course is packed full of useful techniques, language and skills to have you confidently socializing and engaging people in conversation in social settings. So head over to the Art of Business English and you can have a look at the offer I've got up for my AOBE listeners. I'm launching this course this week. So check it out. There's an early bird offer for AOBE listeners. You just need to go over to www.theartofbusinessenglish.com/how to engage people in conversation. Okay, so that's it from me. So don't worry, I'll put a link to that on the website in the show notes so you can have a look at that offer. So I hope you're all having a great start to your September and that you've had a great summer. And I look forward to having you all next week on the Art of Business English. Take care. Bye for now.